I'm sitting here beside this beautiful Lamium, and I'm reminded of a discussion on a Facebook group. Someone had posted the picture of a Lamium and asked the question, what is this? In this video, I'm going to show you a number of different Lamium and discuss which ones you should use in your garden. But I'd also like to discuss another topic, and that has to do with how we name these plants. If you want to become a better gardener, you have to learn to use the botanical names. And in this video, I'll explain why that's so important. So back to the question. The question was, what is this plant? And right away, we had 20, 30 different answers. Most of the people said Lamium. Now, I don't know why so many people answer the same question. I mean, if you see the answer there, just like that answer. It's much better than sending in your own answer. But of course, there were a couple people who said, well, this is something else. And I don't understand that either. I mean, if 20 people think it's Lamium, and you obviously don't know the plant, because you come up with some crazy answer, why post it? Anyways, back to the topic I want to discuss. Along with the name, lots of people gave advice. This is a great plant. You should have it in your garden. Other people said, oh, this guy spreads like crazy. Throw it out. Don't use it in your garden. And the answer isn't what you're thinking. I know people live in different areas. They have different zones, different types of soil, and that can make a big difference in how a plant spreads. But that doesn't explain the differences in this discussion. This discussion is all about the fact that everybody called this Lamium. Well, it turns out there are several different species of Lamium. Some are very nice garden plants, like this one here. Others spread a lot, and you should never have them in the garden. Now, if gardeners call them all Lamium, how can we have an intelligent discussion? How can you tell someone that this particular Lamium is weedy and you shouldn't use it, whereas another Lamium is a great garden plant? The problem here is that people refuse to use the right names for plants. I understand that Latin names aren't always easy to remember and to say, but if you're going to have a discussion with someone, and if you're going to voice your opinion about how a plant grows, you better make sure you're both talking about the same plant. Simply calling them all Lamiums is not good enough. If you want to become a better gardener, it's important that you start using the botanical names, and it's important that you start adding cultivar names so we know which one you're talking about. Now let me show you a bunch of different Lamiums. I'll give you the proper name, and I'll tell you which ones are weedy and which ones aren't. Some of these guys are great garden plants, and others I would never grow in my garden. This is Lamium maculatum, and it's the most popular Lamium you'll find in gardens. There are a number of different cultivars, and quite honestly, many of them are misnamed. This is the one I showed you at the beginning of the program, and I don't have a cultivar name for it. These grow well in part shade, and they don't seem to be too fussy about moisture, but they don't like to get too dry. If it's very dry, then they won't grow very well. You'll get a much nicer clump if you have kind of medium moisture. I imagine in a wet area, these might become a little more aggressive. I find they spread very slowly, they have a shallow root system, and they're quite easy to dig up. I don't consider these to be aggressive. This is a cultivar called Roseum, and you'll notice the leaves are mostly green with a bit of silver on them. The Lamiums with this kind of leaf do tend to grow a little more aggressively than the ones with all silver. This is one of my silver ones, and it has pink flowers. It's slowly spreading, and the plants around it are a bit taller than it, and so they keep it in check. It can only grow in the open spaces between the plants, and this is a great way to use Lamium. You actually want it to spread into those areas that are open, and when the other plant needs the space, they just grow over top of it. And without light, the Lamium won't grow very well. This is a really nice one called White Nancy. It's got nice silver leaves and it has those beautiful white flowers which look really great in a shade garden. This next Lamium is called purpureum. It's an annual and it's a weed. You find it in a lot of gardens, but I don't know if anyone actually plants it. Since it's an annual, the best way to attack this plant is simply prevent it from flowering. If it can't flower, it can't make seeds. If you don't have seeds, you won't have plants. Just pull it out as you see it. I find it all over my garden. It doesn't seem to be too aggressive, and I just weed it out when I find it. This next Lamium has a very strange name. This Lamium is called galeobdolon. Try to say that fast 3 times. This is the Lamium most people are talking about when they're talking about aggressive Lamiums. Now notice the flowers are yellow. The plant's quite a bit taller than the other Lamiums we just looked at. So it's quite distinct compared to the others. People shouldn't be getting these 2 plants confused. The leaves are mostly green with a hint of silver. The problem with this plant is that it makes runners, and the runners, they crawl along the surface of the soil or just underneath it, and they spread really quickly. So in no time at all, it's all over the place. This is a plant you should definitely not grow in your gardens. Now here's a beautiful perennial that very few people grow. This one is also Lamium galeobdolon, but it's a special cultivar named Herman's Pride. If you compare this to the previous picture, you'll see the difference right away. Now, a lot of people focus in on flower color, and they're both yellow. But if you look at the leaves, they're not anything alike. This one is green with silver on it, but the silver patterning is quite distinct. I've had Herman's Pride in my garden for 12 years, and I've never had to dig excess out. My clump gets larger very slowly, and again, larger plants around it seem to keep it in check. This is a good example of why cultivar names are critical. The last 2 Lamiums we looked at are the same species, but this one is a great plant, and the previous one without a cultivar name is a real thug that should never be in the garden. I've one more great Lamium to show you. If you didn't know this plant and you saw it in someone's garden, you would never guess it's a Lamium. It grows about 3 feet tall. It has flowers that do look like a Lamium up close. This is a fabulous plant that very few people grow, but it is readily available in nurseries. It's also available in a white flowering form. That's a plant I don't have yet, but I should get one. This is called Lamium orvala. Grow it in part shade. You can keep it fairly dry, although it likes a bit of moisture, and it seems to be very easy to grow. It's not spreading at all in my garden, but the clump itself gets a little larger every year. I'd certainly put this plant in my top 100 plants for the garden. Don't be shy about using Lamium. Just make sure you plant the right one. Happy gardening!